Hey, welcome into Cross My Heart Ministry. I'm Laura McFarland, and here today with a special treat for you. If you are writing the word with us for the month of May, you know that our word for the month is truth, inspired by Paul's words to the Ephesians as he talked about the armor of God and specifically that belt of truth. So we've chosen verses at the beginning of the month that have you reading and writing through that Ephesians 6 passage talking about the armor of God. And then beginning on day 9, we start looking at verses that all include the word truth, beginning in the Old Testament and continuing on into the New Testament. Now, typically, you know that in the summer, I would be doing all the devotionals. I would be sharing a verse from the Write the Word bookmark and talking about that verse. But this summer, I decided to do something a little different. And so I've invited a few friends to join me. I'll have a guest from my Bible study that I teach here in Northwest Arkansas, cycling in each week. Each of these ladies has chosen one verse, and we're just going to talk about the verse that we've chosen. So I have with me today my friend Hannah, and like the other friends that I have sort of persuaded to jump in, Hannah was a little tentative, but we've had some great conversations even this morning before we recorded about some insight that the Lord has given to her. She has chosen, which verse? John 8:32. Okay. And so Hannah was sharing with me that in just focusing on John 8:32, like any good Bible student, she decided to back up and read the verses that came before verse 32. And as she did that, I think that it sort of put some things in context, and you had some interesting observations to share. So why don't you talk about that a little bit first before we get to verse 32?
Well, Laura, I chose this verse because I thought it was going to be easy, and I thought I sort of knew the answers to some of the questions, but I don't know that I've actually ever read it in context. And so once I did that, a lot of things came out at me that I'd never seen before. The verse itself is, and you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But there's a whole bunch of context that leads up to that. First of all, Jesus wakes up. He goes to the temple early in the morning. He is sitting there. The people are coming to him. The Pharisees and the scribes are also coming. They sort of hatch a plan to try to catch him at breaking the law or trap him in something that he says. And so they kind of pose 3 tests to trap him. Well, he kind of blows each one of their tests out of the water. And through that process, there was a group of Jews that seemed to believe in him and were wanting to know more. And so he kind of pulls them aside and is speaking to them when he says that verse. And so Jesus said to the Jews, I'm backing up to verse 31. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You really can't take that second part away from the first part, because abiding in Jesus' word is what allows you to know who the truth is and what the truth is. And that's what makes you a true disciple, is abiding in his word and doing what he is saying. Otherwise, you don't know what the truth is. My experience with that verse, the truth will set you free, is just common culture. The way it's used in common culture. Growing up, it was always used to sort of mean that you thought this was one way, and then you found out it was another way, and it just made you happy that it was this other way. And so it was used very glibly and had nothing to do with the person of Jesus. And so to read it in this context and realize he was saying a lot more than just be happy is, I think, an important point.
And the word truth itself has been so misused in our culture. Even, I think, getting away from what the word truth actually means, that the truth by its very nature is exclusive. But people in our world will often say, well, that's your truth, and this is my truth, and you do you, and I'll do me. But Jesus has some words here that sort of seem to suggest that there is a truth, if you know the truth. And of course, it prompted me to think about over in John 14:6, where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I think you were talking about that before too, that really he's talking about himself here when he talks about the truth.
That was one of the things that just blew me away. And I had to spend a lot of time on it because I was just so confounded that I hadn't seen that before. But yeah, he's not just talking about something that you can know in your head. He's actually talking about himself. He's saying that a disciple of his is going to get to know him. They are going to watch him. They're going to learn from him. They're going to listen to him. They're going to allow him to expose the places that are dark and the places that have sin in them, and in a way that can set them free. And so I went on quite a little quest to follow that word. The word in Greek is aletheia.
And that's the word for truth.
For truth.
Okay.
And it means the most real, reality, unveiled, uncovered, unconcealed, manifested, or revealed. And so if you plug those words in next to Jesus, he is revealing something to us about who the Father is. He says that over and over again. I only do what the Father tells me to do, or what the Father's showing me.
If you know me, you know the
If you know me, you know the Father. And so he's revealing the Father to us, and he's also revealing who we are in relationship to the Father. He's shining a light on the fact that without salvation, we are dead in our sins. We have no hope without that salvation, without him bringing the truth to us that he is the way, the only way to reach the Father. And so I searched out that. I wanted to know if it was the same word, aletheia, that was used in John 8:32 as was used in John 14:6, because I was like, well, maybe it's a different Greek word, and maybe he's not really talking about himself. But when I looked that up, he was talking about himself. He is talking about himself in a relationship with him.
You know, it's interesting, Hannah, when we see that just this phrase, know the truth, and if we interject the word Jesus, so if you know Jesus, and certainly there are people that know who Jesus is, and Jesus says even the demons know that I'm the Son of God, but they don't follow him or bow to him as Lord. So there are people in our world today, in the 21st century, as there were people in the first century that knew who Jesus was. Oh yeah, he's the son of the carpenter in Nazareth, or oh, he's this guy that's walking around and teaching, or even the demons that would say, yeah, he's the Son of the Most High, but they're not going to follow him. So just like us today, there's a difference between knowing someone and really knowing someone. So we can see a picture of a famous person, and we could say, oh, I know who that is. I recognize that character, whether that's a movie star or a sports figure or whatever, but recognizing them is not knowing them. We don't necessarily text that person, go out to lunch with that person, have a relationship with that person. And so I think if you're listening to this, it's a good self-awareness question and heart-searching question for all of us to really ask, Lord, do I know about you, or do I really know you? Do I really know Jesus, who is the truth? And so that word know is kind of revealing, not just for salvation, but for growing as being a disciple, because Jesus talked about that. If you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples, not just my converts, not someone who's just prayed an empty prayer, but you're my disciples, you're my followers.
Right. And it's interesting that I chose this verse. I think it came at a good time to kind of reiterate or remind me of truths that are of the truth of Jesus in my life, in this season of my life, as compared to other seasons. I said the sinner's prayer every time a Bible camp said to say it, because I wanted the cupcake and I didn't want to go to hell, and I came from a Christian family, so I was a Christian. There was never any doubt about whether I was a Christian. I'd said the prayer at least a few hundred times, and I was in a Christian family. But it wasn't until I was out on my own and I realized that my ways were not working out well for me at all, that I really started to wonder who this person Jesus was, and why did some people talk about him as if he was actually real and not just a fairy tale or something that we talk about at church, and that's the only place. And so that journey brought more and more of his truth into my life through people, through my prayers, asking for him to reveal himself, and him shining the light on these different areas of my life is how I gained any kind of freedom from the bondage that I was in. And so I think that's one of the things that he's trying to point out to them is until you know how much bondage you are in, you don't really realize how much you need a savior. And the people that he was talking to did not see themselves as in bondage. They saw themselves as sons of Abraham, good Jewish people who were going to enter heaven or paradise. So anyway, I did a lot of thinking about what he does set us free from as we get to know him.
Yeah, because he says here, the truth will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
And if we read down further, they objected to that. They were almost insulted by that. What do you mean set us free? We're children of Abraham. We're not in bondage. We know the Most High God. But obviously, there's more to it than what they're just fixating on one thing. And freedom has, just like the word truth and just like the word no, freedom has much bigger implications than we would first think. So what do you think that means for us, even in the 21st century context?
Especially in our context right now, where living your truth is supposed to give you freedom from oppression, this oppressive social, cultural, Christian norm that has been imposed upon you. And it's quite the opposite, in fact. I know I lived about 15 years of my adult life seeking my truth, and it just led me into more and more bondage, and further and further away from what it was I longed for the most. I was very isolated, and at the worst, I was suicidal. I tried twice to take my life because there wasn't anything left for me to try.
Wow.
So thankfully, some really wonderful, God-fearing people came around me, and they actually showed me Jesus. And the more they showed me, the more I wanted to learn about him. I'd been raised in a church, and I said all the Bibles, knew all the Bible stories, knew all the Bible verses, all that type of thing, but it hadn't reached my heart. And so through their help, I was able to, or just them loving on me, I was able to make that connection between knowing Jesus is how you move through this life without getting isolated and picked off by the enemy. Mm-hmm. So I just wrote down several ways that the Lord set me free. I think I have about 6 of them.
Yeah. Well, before you get to that, I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable and honest, because that's a piece of your story that I had not known about you as much as I study with you and love you. And I know that's maybe a hard thing to share, but also it's the truth that sets us free. So even in sharing that, it's a testimony to the faithfulness of the Lord and his provision in your life. And that sometimes in sharing our story, that in itself is the victory and shows the release from the bondage. Because the enemy wants to tell us, shh, don't tell. People will think of you differently. And it is the truth that sets us free in so many ways. But from that spiritual standpoint, acknowledging who we are in him and finding our identity in him, the real ultimate truth is where we find ultimate freedom in a spiritual context. Freedom from our sin, freedom to live, to serve God wholeheartedly, freedom from finding our identity in things that don't matter. So what else has the Lord revealed to you in the topic of freedom?
Well, on the note of trying to take my life, being able to say it out loud is no problem anymore, because it just doesn't have any hold on me. It's not somewhere I ever have to go again. I know where I'm going, and I know who I'm going to. I know who's going to hold my hand the minute I leave this life and go into the next one. And I think that gives me freedom from a fear of death, primarily. So many people are afraid of dying. They're afraid of all the types of dying, financially dying, going bankrupt, or physical health going south, or, relationships dying and leaving, people leaving, all different types of ways that we fear the death of things. And I just don't have that fear anymore. I have a confidence because I know who the truth is. So, of course, the first and foremost that I wrote down was freedom from the bondage of sin. It's one of the reasons I hated Christian people when I wasn't walking with the Lord, was because anytime I was around them, my sin was exposed. And I didn't know that I was enslaved to it. I didn't know there was a connection between the absence of love and joy and peace in my heart with what I was doing. and what I was believing. And it wasn't until people loved me the way I was, kind of, and showed me that there was a connection between what was happening in my heart and what was happening in my behavior, that I was able to go, wait, I don't want this in my heart, so I want to go this way. I want to let them show me how to live differently. So freedom from the bondage of sin, freedom from eternal separation from God. I mean, when all you want to do is die, you think nothing's going to happen. You think you're being relieved of your pain. And you can't conceptualize that there's a God that loves you, that has this whole plan for your life, this whole place prepared for you to go when you pass from this life into the next one. You can't conceive that. All you know is death, and death would be a mercy. And so getting free from that, being able to see that, was just incredibly profound.
You know, I think every person on this planet comes to a place in their life where they come to the place of just exhaustion. In their heart of hearts, they're getting up earlier, pedaling harder, trying harder, doing more to rationalize their carbon footprint, to justify their presence on this planet, and to try to be more or do more. And when you come to the end of yourself, and you see this happen sometimes with famous people who have committed suicide. They get to the top of that mountain, or what they think is the top of the mountain of success. They've made it. They're the Hollywood movie star. They're at the height of their career. And they look around and say, this is all there is. And then we're so just crestfallen and confused and befuddled as to why this seemingly successful person would take their own life. But whether you're in an obscure place, a nowhere person, nobody from nowhere, or whether you're this famous person from somewhere, there's something inside of all of us that needs to find our identity in something outside of us. And that person is Jesus Christ. Right. It's knowing him, the real truth that will set us free from the addiction to self and the bondage of thinking we have to do enough or be enough. It has to be him. Mm-hmm. Jesus is calling to us. God longs to have a relationship with us. And it's knowing him that sets us free from that bondage that you're talking about.
Right. And knowing, the more you get to know Jesus, the more things fall into place. Your perception of God changes. I perceived God as the little boy on the anthill with the magnifying glass zapping all the ants, just waiting for one to crawl out of the hole so I could just torment it, rip a leg off here and there. And so my God was very capricious, very unmerciful. He allowed the worst things to happen to the most innocent of people and children. And so I didn't want to have anything to do with that God. But I didn't realize that our enemy had distorted my view of God, because I wasn't learning truth or growing in truth. I was believing the lies that were sent me. And so once I started to move in that direction of knowing the truth in Jesus, then I could see God more clearly. I saw him more as what the Bible describes him as full of patience, loving kindness, grace for us, mercy for us, if we humble ourselves and recognize who we are as a fallen person. He's right there ready to pick us up and say, okay, let's move forward.
And I think, Hannah, there could be people listening that have had a same distorted view of God. And maybe they haven't gone to that rock bottom place of being fearful of taking their own life. Maybe you're listening and you're still living that lie. You're going through the motions. You're putting on a smiley face and putting on your lipstick and going to church and being that good church lady that shows up with the casserole and visits the sick and is there in Sunday school and every time the doors are open. But inside your heart of hearts, you're wondering, is there more? And maybe you've lived in no small degree of fear that if you step outside the lines that God is going to zap you, and you've got this distorted view of God. And if that's you, if part of your story resonates with Hannah's story, I just want to challenge you to ask God to show you, what is the lie that I believed about you? What is the lie that I believed about myself? And would you show me the truth, Lord? And he will do that. I challenge you to read the Gospel of John with an open mind and an open heart, not shaded by what you've been taught or how you've been raised or even what the church you grew up in taught, but just asking the Holy Spirit to fill you and to reveal to you the truth from the Word of God Almighty.
I think that's a great place to sort of end.
Yeah.
I wanted to end with John 8:36, which is just a few verses down from and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. It's in verse 36. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Yes.
He will. He will. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you follow Cross My Heart Ministry, you know that sometimes we like to declare truths in a one-sentence word that begins with the woman of God. And so today I'll just remind us that what makes us a woman of God is knowing Jesus. It says that if you the verse that Hannah chose says that you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. And so being a woman of God means that you know the truth and the truth has set you free. Being a woman of God means that you will continue to lean into the truth. You can never fully know Jesus. And so coming to him for saving faith means that you begin to recognize him as the Son of God and you know that truth, but then it ushers in this lifelong journey of continuing to go deeper and deeper, knowing Jesus and knowing the truth. He truly is the one that sets you free. Thank you for spending part of your day with Hannah and with me for Cross My Heart Ministry. I'm Laura McFarland. Have a blessed day.